week is Global Breastfeeding Week, and the whole month of August is National Breastfeeding Awareness Month. So I wanted to talk about our story, as it's a little unique since we had twins, and how breastfeeding can really not go according to plan. A little bit of, I guess, background. I just always assumed I was going to nurse. I think a lot of people feel that way. All the women in my life nursed their children, and it was never an issue. Because the boys were a little bit premature, they weren't sure when or how quickly my milk supply would be coming in. Anytime that I would get even just like a couple milliliters of milk, it was really exciting. After the boys were finally released into our room, I did try to nurse. They warned me that because they were small, they were both under 5 pounds, that it may be difficult for them to eat because they'd be burning more calories attempting to eat and nurse than they would be getting in. They said, you may need to wait a couple weeks. Hindsight, I wish I would have just trusted myself and trusted my intuition of when I wanted to start. While I think that, of course, they're the medical professionals, there were moments when I really wanted to try, but I felt like maybe I shouldn't because I was going to be harming my kids. So this is Noah. Say hi. Noah hasn't been in any videos yet, have you, baby? No, you've just been adventuring. Yeah. When we came home, I was really looking forward to it because, as any of you know who have had kids, being in the hospital, especially if you have to stay a couple extra days. Oh! Oh, yeah. We got home and immediately I wanted to try nursing. With twins, I knew it was going to be challenging because there's 2, right? So were we going to try tandem feeding? Was I going to be able to do one at a time? And we tried everything. So I did try, one at a time. They were on the same schedule, which was amazing. I would try to nurse one of them and see how long it took for that baby to be done, and then try and feed the other. The problem was that my milk supply wasn't really coming in super well, especially for 2 babies. So we were supplementing with formula, which was really hard for me. People who are dead set on breastfeeding and then you have to do formula, it's really hard. What we ended up doing is I would try nursing, and Anthony, my husband, would feed the other baby with formula, and then we'd have another bottle ready in case nursing didn't go well, which it never did. I'm not sure that I ever fed them to being full. The first 4 weeks after we got home, easily the most stressful part of it was trying to breastfeed. That is not something I expected, and I was so caught off by not being able to do it well, and the boys didn't latch well. There were a lot of different things going on. If you're set on breastfeeding and you're having challenges doing it, it becomes this huge mental battle. I was in such a difficult place emotionally solely because I was trying to nurse, and it would go horribly. I had, My Breast Friend pillow that they recommend for twins, and it worked for other twin moms. I talked to twin moms before the boys came and asked them what they did, and it seemed, difficult but relatively straightforward. And I tried to tandem feed, and one would latch and one wouldn't, and then everyone would be crying, I would be crying. It was so hard. Those first 4 weeks at least, that was the thing I cried about the most, honestly. And I thought something was wrong with me, and I felt like a failure at being able to overcome those voices inside of your head. That's always been the hardest part for me. And so the fact that I was struggling so much with that was ultimately the most challenging part of having newborn twins. What does exclusively pumping look like? Well, a lot like nursing in the sense that you're doing it very frequently and really every time your kiddos want to eat. So it's really every 3 hours, but you're kind of offset from your baby's feeding schedule. I think it took me around 30 to 45 minutes a session, which they don't recommend, I'm pretty sure, but that's how long it always took me, and I just had to go with that. For me, I was always a barely enough or not quite enough as far as how much I could produce. For some people, they can produce a ton of milk and freeze it and not have to worry about it, but I was never at that point. I would pump enough for the next feeding or maybe not even enough. Here's the thing about babies eating every 3 hours that people don't tell you. It takes them, especially when they're newborns and especially when they're preemies, it takes them a long time to eat. It could take them up to an hour. So the gap in between the feedings gets smaller and smaller. So you have an hour, but you also have to change them. You have to burp them. And then you have to try and get them down to sleep. And then you're pumping. It does not feel like there is a 3 hour gap between feedings. It doesn't feel like there's a 3 hour gap at any point. You're constantly doing something. You know, you don't get that time to cuddle your babies. It's harder to cuddle them with all this stuff on you. Anthony was able to be home on paternity leave, which was a huge blessing. When he went to work, I was absolutely terrified of the pumping and feeding schedule. And I wasn't wrong about how difficult and how stressful that was. But, you know, you figure it out. It wasn't easy. But I did manage to pump and I did manage to feed and change the babies. There were many, many times, I would say 70% of the time, where I was pumping and feeding both of them. One thing I would say is I think if I weren't a stay-at-home mom, if I were back physically at work, exclusively pumping would have been extremely challenging. And so if you're contemplating and wanting to exclusively pump, but you're also working and you're not able to and you're feeling like a failure, don't. It is so hard and it's like a full-time job to pump and then to try and do a thing away from your babies and trying to do work. I mean, you can't leave every 3 hours. Doing for 15 minutes. That's just not how the working world works. I wanted so badly for the boys to be 100% breast milk fed. Stigma I had placed on myself that if I didn't do it, I was failing them. When I got to that point where I said, okay, we need to start supplementing, it was so hard. Once I started supplementing, I was so much less stressed. My production was so much better. And I knew that my boys were okay. And honestly, they did not care. They didn't care if it was formula or breast milk. They liked it all. And I know not all babies are like that, but just know that formula is pretty incredible. We've come a long way since our parents' time even. And so if you feel like there is a stigma and an expectation around you, just realize you have to do what's best for them. You want your babies to eat. You don't want them to go hungry. Sometimes that means you have to stop being so proud and just decide to try formula. You may have to try a couple different ones and see what works for you. The boys did exceptionally well with formula. And like I said, I exclusively pumped. I was pumping all the time. Like I felt like I lived and was hooked up to a machine my whole life, basically. I was only ever able to, do 70 to 80% of what they needed. And sometimes that was hard, but I just needed to get over it. Like, I was doing the best I could, and my body was doing the best it could. There were a lot of demands on me, and adding more pressure and guilt to myself wasn't helping. I mean, exclusively pumping was not glamorous. It was really, really difficult, but hindsight, I'm glad I made that decision for myself, because to me it was the closest thing to the experience that I had wanted to have. On this Global Breastfeeding Week, remember that feeding your baby whatever they need, that's what's important. It doesn't matter how they get fed. It doesn't matter if you're nursing, if you're pumping, if you're using donated breast milk, if you're using formula or goat's milk, I think is a thing. There are so many options out there, but you have to figure out what works for you and your family. And don't let your perceptions or other people's perceptions get in the way of you doing what you feel is right for your kids. At the end of the day, what I've learned and what I learned during this process was fed is best, and I truly believe that. If you make the decision to not nurse, even if you could, that's totally up to you. Nursing is hard. It's really hard. When I hear other people talk about nursing, I'm like, well, pumping was hard in different ways, but there were a lot of things that you don't have to deal with when you're pumping that you do when you're nursing. The issue is so near and dear to my heart because I know, and I've been there. And as we are expecting a third, I do hope to try and nurse, but if it doesn't work out that way, then I hope that I have more grace for myself in that situation. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I am really excited about this week. I'm excited to post some more things, so definitely follow me on Instagram at the messy middle and then an underscore. And you can see my adorable human beings, my kiddos, and pregnancy updates and just everything going on in our lives. And of course, make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share with your friends who are going through their breastfeeding journey.